Hi, my name is Jimmy and welcome to Lock Lab. Today I'm excited to show you how I built my latest arcade machine using the Pandora's Box 4S Plus arcade kit. This is probably the best arcade I've ever built. This is the third machine I've built, and the reason why I built this is to serve as a thank you gift for one of my friends. The kit came with just about everything except for the monitor, the wood, T-molding, and the marquee. It also came with a coin slot, but this is really big and I didn't know where to put it, so I custom built my own and incorporated it into the marquee. If you look closely on each side, there's a tiny slot, and these are the coin slots. They only accept quarters or larger as credits, and anything else is ignored. So here's a nickel. Doesn't register. Quarter. Quarter. Dollar. Yeah, there you go. This is the back side of the arcade machine, and I wanted to show you a couple other features. The kit also came with a lock and key. And the reason why it's locked up is because my friend has kids and he doesn't want them playing the arcade all the time. But in case they want to have like a birthday party or something where they have infinite coins, there's a switch here which activates free play mode. And this connects the two switches in the front to the coin slots, so you can have infinite coins. This funny looking funnel shaped thing is just a cardboard funnel to funnel the coins into this coin box. This is just a cardboard box which collects all the coins. This is the amplifier that came with the kit, and here's where you would control the volume or turn it off. This is the power supply that came with it, and the Pandora's Box 4 is mounted to the base of the arcade. So now let me take you through the step-by-step process of how I built the machine. The first thing I do is take the basic dimensions of the monitor and then transfer this into SketchUp. Once I got the angle of the monitor, from here I can build the entire arcade cabinet and include some of the components such as the speakers and see if the marquee fits. Next, I translate the dimensions I made from SketchUp onto the plywood using drafting tools. With all the dimension lines now drawn onto the plywood, I can now start cutting out the panels using a jigsaw. I happen to lend out my table saw to a friend, which is why I'm using a jigsaw to do the straight cuts. I use a sander to make sure the sides are very square. Here I'm cutting the top panel and the front panel of the arcade machine using a bandsaw. So I finished cutting all the panels out for the arcade machine, and a good idea is to draw construction lines on the inner side of the side panels. You can see there some construction lines. This is where the monitor would go, speaker mount panel, top panel, and it includes the thickness of the wood as well. And the purpose of this is when I mount these little blocks, which will attach to the side panel, I can know exactly where to put it.
In order to put the arcade together, you need mounting blocks that go on each panel. These mounting blocks are made from scrap particle board that are 3/4 inch thick.
I first drill countersink holes so the screws can go in nicely. I'm using 1¼ inch length screws so they don't punch through the other side of the panel. Now that I have most of the mounting blocks installed, I plan to screw the panels together to do a test fit. For the front panel and the joystick panel, I try to minimize the number of screws that I use. I only use 1 screw per side. This way I can remove the joystick panel easier in case I need to make adjustments. As I put the panels together, I'm looking how well the surfaces meet up against each other. If they're flush or if they're a little bit offset. If they are offset, then I'll, at this point, remove the panels and adjust the blocks or sand down the panels. All the panels seem to fit satisfactory. Now I'm going to try to test fit the monitor. I want to make sure the monitor fits snugly inside the panels, but also I'm looking at the back of the panel and marking this. This is so I can insert mounting blocks to secure everything in place. Now that I have the marks for the back of the monitor, I know where to put the mounting blocks. So here I have the monitor installed with 6 mounting blocks, 4 on the back and 2 on the bottom. The monitor is secured also by the top speaker panel and the joystick panel. All these hold it securely in place. And now it's time to start making holes. I take a compass to draw some circles for the speaker holes. I then use my jigsaw to cut these large circles out.
Next, I start drilling out the holes for the joystick panel. The joystick holes are 1 inch diameter, and the holes for the buttons are 1 1/8 inch diameter. The front panel also has 2 buttons on each side, one for each player and then one for a coin button in case it's enabled.
So next up is to cut a 1/16 inch slot into the side panels so I can fit the T-molding. This is a slot cutter kit that I got from Harbor Freight, and now I need to install the bit. So when inserting the blade into the router shaft, it's very important to make sure the blade is facing the right direction. So you don't want it to spin this way. You want the teeth to cut into the wood, so if it's spinning this way, you want... Now it's important to get some scrap pieces of wood to adjust the height of the slot cutter, because I'm not exactly sure if it's in the center. So what I have is a sample piece of T-molding, and I'm going to just do some test cuts and insert it to see if the height is correct, if I can either go higher or lower. So let's do some cuts. First try, not bad. I just kind of eyeballed it.
Now that I have the height of my router calibrated, I can route all the panels. You want to be extra careful when routering because if you tilt the panels just slightly, you're going to widen the T-molding slots and the T-molding won't fit very well. You only have one shot, so be very careful.
So now I've got all the pieces laid out. I'm going to paint it next, and for this I'm going to use my makeshift paint sprayer. If you want to know more about this, I have another YouTube video showing how to build this. So I'm going to paint all the panels with white paint.
The paint is now dry, and now I can put all the panels together for final assembly. Now that I have all the panels together, it's time to install the speakers. The speakers are installed using nuts and bolts. I pre-drilled the holes so the bolts fit through nicely.
So now I'm ready to attach the T-molding.
With the T-molding, I want to start at the bottom of the arcade so you don't see the seam between the start and end of the T-molding strip. I need to snip a little notch out of the T-molding so it could bend around the corners. This needs to be done for each corner that I meet. I now have all the T-molding installed. I want to install the monitor now.
Now I have this 1-inch angle iron, 1/16 inch thick, and I'm going to measure the width of the machine. This is to hold in the marquee panel.
Now that I have the length measured, I'm going to cut 2 strips, one for the top and the bottom.
So for this angle aluminum to fit around the speakers, I have to cut these notches. So I measured them already, so just to show you. So I finished cutting the notches out of the aluminum, so now it fits. However, in the process, I scratched the hell out of it, and now I need to buff it. So I'm going to attempt to buff it with some really high grit sandpaper, and see how that turns out.
Sanding the angle aluminum got rid of the scratches. Now I'm drilling holes so I can mount it to the cabinet. I continue assembly by mounting the joysticks and the buttons. To mount the joystick, I use short brass screws with washers. This is so it doesn't punch through the joystick panel.
So I jumped ahead a little bit. I mounted the AC input switch using just a couple blocks of wood, a couple screws. And my plan is to install this back panel. It's just a thin board like that. And there's these pieces of metal which I mounted, which acts as a stop. And I mounted a block on the top to act as a stop as well. This back panel will be locked with a key, so I'm going to mount the lock right here. So to make the coin slots, I've used some cardboard from cereal boxes and cut some strips and folded them into an L shape and then taped them together. And I cut out a rectangular hole that's the size of a nickel. So there's about an 1/8 inch lip here. So it's going to go down the ramp and it'll filter out every coin that's smaller than the nickel. But if you insert a quarter, it will accept it. Same with 50-cent piece. So this second cardboard is just to create a slot so the coin doesn't fall over. So there'll be 2 chutes, one for each player 1 and player 2 coin slots. And it'll look something like this. And I plan to mount these cardboard chutes with some cardboard here. Just glue it on. After much fiddling, I finished installing the 2 coin slots that I made out of cereal boxes. I'll show you how it works. In the front panel, there's a tiny little notch that's the size of a coin that I cut out on each side, and these are the coin slots. And there is an optical switch here which registers the coins, but at the side here, anything smaller than quarters will be filtered out and will not pass through the optical switch. So these are penny. It'll always go to the side, whereas a quarter will go through the center. And there's 2 of them for player 1 and player 2. Now to catch the coins, I built this ugly looking funnel out of cardboard, and I can mount it right here. So, put a little box at the bottom of the funnel. The next part is to hook up the rest of the electronics so it actually registers the coin as a switch. So now I've started to wire the power and all the other cables. And the first thing I did was to hook up the AC lines, the mains, to the power supply, as well as the monitor to the power supply. So I made sure everything powers up just fine. Next thing is to test the actual Pandora box 4 and see if there's video output. And now I have to connect this jamma harness to it. So it looks from the pinout that the power is always on these pins that are isolated. So looks like the 12 and 5 volts go here. So before you actually hook it up, I went ahead and powered on the power supply and adjusted the trim just to make sure the voltage is within 0.1 volts of the actual. So that's important to do, so you don't want to fry your Pandora box. Let's just power it on just like that. Power cord here. It's possible I have a short with all these wires dangling here. I might try connecting all these first and then powering it up. So I'm going through the wiring of this jamma cable harness and just double checking the pinout for the Pandora box. And once again, this is the second time I've had it where it's incorrect, and they put wires where they don't need to be. For instance, this red wire here next to this blue goes to no connection, so that doesn't need to be there. There's also this extra gray cable on the second player button 4. There doesn't need to be 2 wires going to that, so I think these 2 extra wires can be soldered to somewhere else, or just clipped. So yeah. Now I have to connect all these to the joystick buttons, and this bundle goes to the speakers, which is kind of redundant with this port, and the coin switches, which I'll deal with later. So at least have them in somewhat organized bundles, and now it's time to connect them. Okay, I got it all wired up, at least the joystick parts and buttons. So let's fire it up and do a test run to see if I can get a display on the monitor. Oh, there's some kind of light in there that blinked. But this power supply isn't flickering, so... Hey, I got image! Oh, the sound isn't connected yet, nor are the coin buttons, but hey, it's a good start. Enjoy life with quality. Well, after running it for about 10 seconds, look what happened. The wires started to melt together. There was way too much current for these tiny little wires. This gauge must be like super thin. So I gotta replace these and solder thicker wires here. So it looks like there was 22 gauge wire that came with the jamma harness. So if you ever do buy these from eBay or Chinese websites, do cut these off and replace them with a thicker gauge. I'm going to use 18 gauge that I got from a salvage power supply. I might even double up the wires just to be safe. But yeah, cut these off because it's going to be a fire hazard. So another mistake I found on the cable harness is that the coin for player 1 and player 2, there are 2 wires for player 1 coin, and there's no wire for player 2, so I need to just move this wire from 1 to 2. I think that's all the mistakes that were corrected. I added thicker wire because the other ones was 22 gauge. And this is thicker 18 gauge, so it shouldn't melt. And I doubled up the 5-volt wire and ground. These other wires I clipped. These are the video out. I don't need those, as well as the speaker out. I'm using the 1/8" audio jack here into an amplifier.
What I'm doing now is wiring up a push button that accesses the Pandora's box setting mode. On the Pandora's box, there's a small switch on the side which you can access the settings, but also there's 2 pins on the jamma cable harness which you can hook up an external button. This is what I'm doing here. Next, I wire up a toggle switch which enables free play mode. This overrides the coin slots so that every time you push the front 2 switches, it registers as a credit. The 2 black buttons on the front of the arcade machine are the free play buttons. When the toggle switch is not in free play mode, these are just ignored. Now I'm wiring up the optical switches to the toggle switch so you can select between free play mode, buttons, and coin slots. Now I wire up the optical switches together using a proto board. The optical switches are powered by 5 volts. They also have 1K resistors in series with the 5 volts. Finally, I label the button and toggle switch so my friend knows what they do.
Last piece of the puzzle is the backlighting of the marquee panel. For this I'm using LED strip, and I adhered it to this panel here. Now I got to solder up the wires. It's 12 volts. There'll be one on the bottom and then one on the top on this surface up here.
Alright, I connected all the backlighting and wired it all up. And the last thing to put on is the coin chute. Rather, the coin funnel, I should say. And for this, I just use some thumbtacks to secure. Alright, let's put the top cover on. For the marquee panel, I just printed on photo paper. It's 2 separate sheets, and they're slightly overlapped, which is why you can kind of see this line in the middle. And I think one piece of paper is slightly thicker than the other, so this one's a little bit brighter. I think I'm going to have to order an actual marquee, but this is the design that I just printed out really quick. But it looks pretty decent. And these are the coin slots. There's a little cutouts on the side. I think I want the marquee to extend to the edge as well, so just the slot will light up white. So I reprinted the marquee on 2 sheets of photo paper, 8.5 by 11, and it turned out to be a lot nicer because the pages were the same thickness this time, and I just buttoned them up together and tried to minimize the seam between the two, and I think it turned out pretty nice. You can barely see the seam. If I could go closer here. Yeah, it's right there, but I think it looks pretty nice. Last but not least is the back panel with a key and lock. So to prevent people from playing it for free. This is for a friend with kids, so I'm sure they want to control their kids from not playing it too much. Hence the coin mode and free play mode. So this will keep them out from the coins. Like that. Alright, now it's time to try it out. Let's try the game called Cyberbots. This is a fighting game with robots. It's pretty cool. Ooh, the jackal. Oh, I suck. All right. Haha! So, to try a different game, what we do is hold the player 1 button and then insert a coin. That exits the game. There's a different mode where you can hold the player 1 button and it'll give you a menu, but you have to select that in the setup. Let's try a different game. The nice thing about the Pandora Box 4S is that it has everything that Pandora Box 3 minus the adult games, so you don't have to filter those out, but also has some of the classic games like Donkey Kong, Pac-Man, Miss Pac-Man, and Galaga, stuff like that. So let's see if I can find it.
Where are you, Donkey Kong? There you go, Donkey Kong. The emulation isn't perfect. I think it's missing a couple sounds. For instance, I think there's a noise when Mario is supposed to walk and jump, but there's no sound. Ah! I need more practice. Let's try it every game. Pac-Man, ha. Miss Pac-Man. The games are kind of organized in a general categorical way. There's like fighting games are in the first section, then there's side scrollers, scrolling shooters, but it's very loose, so it's kind of haphazard how these games are organized. You have to really go page by page to search. Oh, what the heck? Oh, something. I think there's a glitch in my joystick. Alright. So overall, I think I like this arcade a lot better than the last one I did. But this one's going to a friend, like I said, so I think they'll enjoy it very much. Pandora Box 4S is significantly better than the Pandora's Box 3. It has more games. It includes other games like Mortal Kombat, but the emulation is so slow that it's pretty much unplayable unless you like playing with lots of lag. There's a couple other games that have glitches where the second player buttons aren't configured correctly, or they don't even work at all. So, but those are far and few between. For the most part, you have a lot of games to choose from. It's going to take forever to go through each one. So there's a lot of playtime with this. So thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed it.